everyone, and welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to talk about the most commonly used abbreviations, and we might touch on some really common questions that I see all the time in my trying to conceive group, some questions that I've been asked personally by family and friends, or just some of the questions that I think off the top of my head. So first and foremost, there's TTC. TTC is trying to conceive, trying to get pregnant. Then there's AF. And AF is that famous old ant flow. That is your period. And when you're trying to conceive, every single cycle you tell that witch to take a hike, but she doesn't usually listen. And there's BFN and BFP. BFN and BFP, big fat positive, big fat negative. That's relating to your pregnancy tests. And so if you have a BFN, unfortunately it's a negative, and there's only that one line, like always. BFP, you got your big fat positive, you're pregnant, and we're hoping that little bean sticks. And then there's HPT. So HPT is your home pregnancy test. It is what you do in your bathroom like 100 times every cycle because you're obsessive. Just kidding, don't do that. You shouldn't actually track until after your period's missed. And then there's OPK. OPK is ovulation predictor kits. Ovulation predictor kits test the LH, or luteinizing hormone, that is in your urine, and it tells you if ovulation's kind of impending or if it's still a few days away, and then you can kind of plan your sex schedule around that. There is CD. So CD is cycle day. So I am actually currently cycle day 10 out of a usually 30-day cycle. And day 1 is obviously the first day your period comes, and we're hoping that by cycle day 30 I have a positive pregnancy test, but we'll see. And then there's CP. CP is cervical position. So to tell your cervical position, you would actually take a finger or two, depending on whatever you're comfortable with, obviously wash your hands, and you would reach inside and you would feel for this thing that's kind of like the tip of your nose. So depending on where you are in your cycle, it'll actually feel different. So one time it'll feel like the tip of your chin, another time like the tip of your nose, and when ovulation is close, it'll feel like the touch of your lips. But it'll be very, very high when you're close to ovulation and very, very low when you're close to period or your next period coming. There is CM. CM is cervical mucus, and again, you would know this by feeling inside of your vagina. But your CM can kind of tell you if you're about to ovulate as well. So there's EWCM, and EWCM is egg white cervical mucus, and that is your most fertile cervical mucus. That is when you're about to ovulate. That is like, get in the sack and go to business now. Then there's DPO. So DPO is days past ovulation or days post ovulation, however you'd like to say it, and that is your first day after ovulation until the day of your next period. And we always hope there's about 12 to 14 days between the two, but some women have kind of a deficient little cycle there where they only have 7 to 9 days, which is a little short, but we can work on that. And then there's DPIUI. DPIUI is days past IUI, and IUI is actually intrauterine insemination. And what that is they take the male sperm and they inject it right into the uterus, and hopefully again by 14 days you have that positive pregnancy test. And the reasons for IUI is if the man has low sperm count or low motility, which means they're very, very slow, then it kind of helps them just get that little jump start to get into the fallopian tubes. Or also if the woman has very bad endometriosis and it's kind of hard for them to squeeze past, and you can have medical assistance with that. There's EDD. EDD is estimated due date, and it is usually an estimate because not every woman knows exactly when they ovulated or when exactly they conceived unless you're tracking. There's FMU. FMU is first morning urine, and that is usually when you would use a pregnancy test if that's the state of your cycle you're at. So then there is FRER, and that is a first response early result, and that is the most sensitive pregnancy test on the market, I believe. I believe it's 6.8 or 6.3 MIU/mLs that it actually detects for HCG. And at that point, I mean, there's some on Amazon that say they detect at 6 or 5, but first response is usually the most popular one as well. And then we have HCG. So HCG is actually the hormone that is produced by an implanted embryo that is kind of nestled in your little uterus, and that is what your pregnancy test will actually pick up. Then there's LH, like I said, is luteinizing hormone. And then there's LP. LP is your last menstrual period. And whether you use an app to track it, or if you just put it in your phone calendar, if you write it down on a calendar, whatever you do, you should always know when your last menstrual period was, and that kind of helps keep track of your cycles. Especially if you have long irregular cycles, you definitely need to know when your last period was, especially when you're seeking help from a medical professional. They will always ask when your last menstrual period was. So MC is miscarriage. O or O day, so ovulation or ovulation day. That's the date that your little egg is hopefully being released from your body and hopefully gets fertilized, if that's what you're doing right now. OTC is over the counter. That is your prescriptions, that is your vitamins, that is everything you can get over the counter. So PCOS is polycystic ovarian syndrome. PCOS is so popular, not really popular, but common, I should say. And it is when you actually have a whole bunch of cysts all over your ovaries, and that's because your body's not releasing the eggs like they're supposed to, and they kind of go to the outside and they just kind of sit there. You usually have higher levels of testosterone, and you usually have higher levels of insulin as well. So if you're insulin resistant, then you would go on metformin or insulin, whatever your doctor prescribes for you. And that is actually a medical diagnosis. You cannot diagnose yourself with it and just go around telling everybody you have PCOS. It is a medical diagnosis that is done via blood work and ultrasound, and that is how they will determine if it is actually PCOS or other fertility issues. There is endo. Endo is endometriosis, and it is very, very painful. It is the thickening of the uterine lining, and so it usually shrinks your uterus. It compresses it down and down and down till there's very minimal space for sperm to kind of get through, and that's why some people with endometriosis have a really hard time kind of getting pregnant, because the sperm just literally cannot get through up into the fallopian tubes. And then there's the SMEP. SMEP is the sperm meets egg plan. And I will talk about this in another video because it can get very in-depth, but what it is you have sex every other day up until ovulation is impending, and then you have sex 3 times in a row, etc. But it's just a little plan to kind of hope and pray that your sperm does meet your egg. And then there's IVF. So IVF is in vitro fertilization. In vitro fertilization is where they take your egg and his sperm or donor sperm and put them in a little petri dish and hope that they kind of come together. And they usually know that it's successful within about 2 days of putting them in the same dish. And they start growing a little embryo. And once the little embryo starts growing, they extract that embryo and put it in the woman's uterus and hope and pray that it sticks. And sometimes you can have multiple eggs that get fertilized, which is fantastic because you have a higher chance of having at least one be successful. And if you want more information on that, I can talk about that in another video. I already talked about IUI. So BBT goes along kind of with OPKs. BBT is basal body temperature, and there's very specific ways of tracking that. So I will put that in with the OPK video as well. And then there is BD. BD is baby dancing, also known as sex. There's HSG. I cannot pronounce the word. If you want to look it up, you can. But HSG is actually a series of x-rays or ultrasounds as they insert this dye up into your uterus. And there's no blockages. It goes from your uterus up into your fallopian tubes all the way down to where your ovaries are, and then it flows out and your body will absorb it. It does require that you have to have antibiotics just because it's dye and it's not the most sterile kind of environment that they do this in as well. But it just tells them if there's a blockage of why you're not getting pregnant. So I'm actually gonna have the HSG done. I'm just waiting for my appointment just to make sure there's no blockages in my tubes or in my uterus. It can determine if you have fibroids or anything like that as well. There's RE, so reproductive endocrinologist, and they just specialize in reproductive organs. And if you can get pregnant, if you can't get pregnant, they will be the ones that really tell you for sure. They work usually in fertility clinics, and they're kind of the go-to people. Very hard to get in to see though. And then there's US. US is ultrasound, not United States. So ultrasounds are done for a number of reasons. If they need to see if you have ovarian cysts, if they need to see if you have endometriosis, if they need to see if you have fibroids, if they need to just check your little embryo if you're pregnant, that's the good time. As long as everything goes well, and you'll see that little flicker on the heart. And then there's the TWW, dreaded TWW. That is the 2-week wait, and that kind of goes along with DPO as well. So your TWW is your day after ovulation to the day of your next period, and we always hope that it's about 14 days, so that is your 2-week wait. There is VVFL, and the V's can vary, I'm telling you that now, but it is when you see, or you think you see, a very, very faint line on that pregnancy test, and you kind of just need somebody to look at it for you, verify that it's actually there and you're not going crazy or thinking that it's there. And then there's POAS. So I'm a POAS. It's pee on a stick addict. And it's just you kind of obsessively test with OPKs or HPTs, whatever you're testing with at that time, but it can get very addictive, especially when you're close to ovulation. You can use so many different tests in one day just to see kind of that line progress darker and darker, but it is kind of interesting. And then there's SO. So SO is your significant other. So whether it be your husband, your wife, your partner, your spouse, whatever. And then there's DH and DW. DH is darling husband, DW is darling wife. And then there's OH, and that's your other half. And then there's also PDG. So PDG is not very common, but that is a progesterone home test. So progesterone is what actually would sustain your pregnancy along with HCG. And some women, especially in the United States, they can actually get PDG tests and check at home. And it's just a urine test, just kind of like a OPK as well. So that's it for most of my abbreviations that I have. If anybody that is trying to conceive knows of any more, you can drop them in the comments and then other people can see them as well. But I think I covered most of them. I kind of wrote them down just so that I didn't miss any. Okay, so moving on to frequently asked questions. So I see questions multiple times a day, usually the same questions multiple times a day as well. So starting with number 1, does your cycle length matter? Yes and no. That is kind of a tricky question. So cycle length is your first day of your period all the way to the day of your next period. And if you have a really, really long cycle, it's kind of harder to know when you ovulate or if you are ovulating. If you're having irregular cycles, if you're having one cycle is 28 days, which is the norm, and then the next cycle is 65 days. Well, like, how do you know when you ovulate? So it is really tricky for tracking that way, but it's not impossible. So it can kind of hinder every other cycle if you're having really long cycles, and then versus really short cycles. It can kind of hinder your chances, but it's not a definite no, you can't get pregnant, or no, it's going to take you forever, etc. It is possible, just might take a little bit of work to kind of get your cycles under control. The next question is, does sex position matter? No. Have fun. Do whatever you want. If you want to do a handstand, go for it. If you like doggy, if you like missionary, whatever you like, as long as you're safe about it. Like, don't get strapped to the ceiling because it's a little harder, obviously, and a little bit more dangerous, and we want you to stay safe and have fun. Also, but putting up your legs after, or laying down for 15 minutes after, is kind of a myth, but some women still do it. It's just something kind of fun to do. Your partner kind of laughs at you, but if you feel you need to put your legs up, go for it. If you feel like you can get up and pee right away, go for it. It's up to you. It's not a definite answer of yes, it helps, no, it doesn't. It's never been proven or disproven, so go for it. And also, generally, what can improve your chances of getting pregnant? So the only ways to improve your chances of getting pregnant is if you track ovulation with OPKs, BVT, however you track, exactly how long your cycles are. So if your cycles are 28 days, then you'll roughly know when you ovulate by tracking, and then you'll see how long your LP is. Oh, that is one that I missed, your LP, so your luteal phase. So your luteal phase is the most important, and that kind of goes along with DPO as well. And that luteal phase, you want to be about 12 to 14 days. And luteal phase is the first day after ovulation all the way to the day of your next period. If it is not 12 to 14 days, if it's shorter, then you have a defect, and unfortunately it is harder to get pregnant because you're not allowing time for implantation. So the ways to improve your chances are know how long your LP is, and also making sure that you're having sex more frequently, especially around the time of ovulation. I know sometimes people are working, some people are sick, tired, have other kids, etc. So it is harder but do your best. There's only ways to really improve your chances. Obviously, if you see a fertility doctor and they rule out anything that's going on, if you have to take medications, if you have to take vitamins, if you have to take whatever. The other one I see a lot is about having a negative pregnancy test at 10 days past ovulation, and it's negative, but then can you have a positive further on? Yes, that is possible. So just because you're 10 days past ovulation, you got a negative pregnancy test, does not mean you're out. Stop freaking out and just relax. So 10 days past ovulation is still very early. Embryos usually implant anywhere between 6 to 12 days after ovulation. And you might feel some cramping and stuff like that, but not always. Not every single person feels the cramping from implantation, and not every single person has implantation bleeding either. And implantation bleeding is very light pink or brown. It's just kind of like old blood mixed with a little bit of new blood, and it's usually very like sticky, so it's mixed with your cervical mucus as well. But don't freak out if you see that. But 10 days is still pretty early, especially if you didn't even implant yet, because when I did get pregnant, I didn't even have a positive pregnancy test until 13 days past ovulation. I mean, that was the first time I checked, and it was pretty bright, but still kind of faint. So if I would have tested at 10 days past ovulation, I probably wouldn't have had a positive, and I probably would have been all depressed and sad about it, like just kind of self-pity. But it is possible to have a negative and then a positive. Now, if you have a positive at 10 days past ovulation and all of a sudden it's not getting any darker, again, don't freak out, because HCG does take a while to kind of build up in your system, and some women just have lower levels of HCG even when pregnant, and their pregnancy is perfectly sustainable. But maybe just go to your doctor and get some blood work done just to rule out an early miscarriage. That's all I'm going to say about that. Some of the other questions I get is about PCOS and endo and ovarian cysts and fibroids. So I'm going to talk about those all in another video, just because I could ramble on forever about those. Another one is low sperm count. What kind of can increase low sperm count? So I'm not a medical professional, but I have done a little bit of research on it, and maca root actually is probably the best one, as well as CoQ10 and vitamin E. So that's all I'm going to say. Do your own research about that, or talk to your doctor about those, because some people cannot take those due to other medical conditions or other pills that they're on. But that is just what, like, my husband takes. My husband takes vitamin E and maca root as well. We don't know about his sperm count yet because he's actually getting that checked. But it kind of just helps, and you think it's helping, so it doesn't hurt. What can you do to lengthen your LP? And again, it varies, and it will always vary by doctor as well. So my doctor, I asked for it, but he finally gave me progesterone because I was having a luteal phase defect as well, and progesterone helps sustain a pregnancy by not shedding your uterine lining. And so the progesterone, my number finally stayed higher for longer, so it actually allowed time for an embryo to implant, and that's actually when I got pregnant. So it does help. Not every doctor is going to agree to it. Some doctors will give you letrozole or Femara as well, or Clomid, and just to see if you are ovulating on time within your cycle range. So if you have a 28-day cycle, you should be ovulating about 12, 13, or 14 days into your cycle. If you ovulate any later, then your LP is going to be very short, and that's what we want to avoid. A couple other questions is there ways to determine what gender you're going to have by which sexual positions, or if your head is this way or this way? No. It is all a myth. But I mean, if you believe in it, go for it, have fun. So I'm always told that if you want a girl, have your head in the south. If you want a boy, have your head in the north. It's just something kind of fun that Aaron and I joke about. So we are happy with whatever we get, but we always say we would love a little girl first. So we just kind of joke around like, oh, let's do it this way or let's do it that way. It's just something fun. It's just kind of a little joke. So don't take it serious. But I mean, hey, go for it if you feel like it. And remember, every woman only has about a 25% chance of getting pregnant every cycle. So it may take a while, but it can be fun. Just keep it fun. Keep it romantic. Keep it spontaneous. Don't make it work, because then that is when it gets depressing. That is when you and your partner tend to fight more often, and that's just when sex is not enjoyable for anybody. So just keep it fun. Keep it in, you don't have to keep it in the bedroom. If you want to go outside and be adventurous about it, go for it. But just remember that it's you and your partner. You both need to be on the same page about trying to conceive and trying to bring a little one into the world. So have fun, be spontaneous, love each other, and just keep it fun.